I share a nerve with the most dangerous man in the empire, the Regent King, Ronan Song. When he opposes me in court, the ministers think it's politics. They don't know that if I touch my own skin, he's the one who shatters. Hidden behind the bamboo curtain, I slide my hand into my robe. Across the hall, Ronan's voice dies in his throat. Color floods his face. His grip tightens on his sword. He can't force out another word. That night, he breaks into my chambers and pins me to my bed. "Do it again," he murmurs against my ear. "What you did to me in court." I refuse. He only smiles, and this time he puts his hands on himself. Whatever he feels, I feel. And in this palace, one wrong touch might cost us the throne or our lives. Chapter 1. My name is Arya Zhou, Princess Royal of the Great Zhou Empire. After father, the late emperor, passed away, my 5-year-old brother Alex Zhou ascended the throne. Because he was too young to rule, I governed the empire from behind the bamboo curtain. I had barely held power for 3 months when several senior ministers recalled the young frontier general Ronan Song and named him regent. Everyone in court knew we were sworn enemies. What they didn't know was that Ronan and I shared a forbidden sensory bond, a secret father hid from the world. He sent Ronan to the frontier years ago for one reason: distance weakened the bond. But now Ronan was back, and the first thing he did was challenge me publicly. He sat in the front row of court, sword in hand, posture arrogant and unbothered. I sat behind the bamboo curtain, watching him through the narrow slit. Alex cleared his throat and lifted a memorial. "I've read all your petitions. If there is nothing else, court is dismissed." Ronan stood. "There is still one matter. Now that I've returned, the Princess Royal's marriage should be arranged." Of course, he wanted me married off and removed from the palace, so he could rule uncontested. From behind the curtain, I answered coolly. "Father once promised me to Minister Fang's son, but Minister Fang was convicted of corruption. The entire family was executed. That marriage can no longer proceed. The matter must be reconsidered." Ronan bowed respectfully to the emperor, acting the model official. "Your Majesty, I have selected several noble young men for the Princess Royal. Please choose someone suitable." As he returned to his seat, he deliberately knocked the corner of the stool with his knee. He barely felt it. I nearly cried out from the shock of pain. Our bond was that deep. My brief silence let the old ministers jump in and support Ronan. He continued to lecture Alex about the benefits of my marriage, pretending to be earnest. I glared at him through the curtain. If he wanted to use our bond against me, fine. Two could play that game. I slid my hand slowly inside my robe. Hidden behind the curtain, with no maids present because it was court session, no one could see me. But Ronan felt everything. The deeper my hand moved, the quieter his voice became. This curtain was crafted specifically for me. I could see everyone clearly, but no one could see me. Ronan choked mid-sentence. He sat down abruptly, his face flushed scarlet as he bent forward, trying and failing to speak. He threw me a murderous glare. Since I wasn't the one suffering, I didn't stop. He let out a muffled sound, quickly swallowed it, and forced himself upright again. Then, voice hoarse and low, he said, "It's getting late. We'll discuss this another day." Court dismissed. He didn't even wait for Alex to confirm. He practically fled the hall, and at the doorway launched himself into the air with his martial skills, crashing into pillars twice on the way out. My waist hurt for the rest of the day because of it. 7 years ago, before returning to the palace, I had lived on the streets and nearly died. After they found me, I was bedridden for months and never fully recovered. It was after that illness that the shared sensation between Ronan and me formed. When the maids supported me back to my chambers after court, my leg was already bruised. Annoying, but at least he suffered more. That night, I reviewed the memorials by candlelight. Everything submitted to the emperor went through Ronan first. He handled what he could and sent the rest to Alex, which eventually landed on my desk. I might be Princess Royal, but no woman had ruled in our empire's history. Every step I took in the court felt like walking on thin ice. The top memorial in the stack was Ronan's list of potential husbands for me. All noble young men, all from families powerful enough to look respectable, but not powerful enough to strengthen my position if I married them. Exactly what Ronan wanted. After finishing the memorials, I trimmed the candlewick and turned toward my bed. And froze. A man lay half reclined on my pillow. I backed toward the door, ready to run, but every maid outside was unconscious, collapsed on the floor. I exhaled sharply and shut the door. Ronan Song twirled the dagger I kept under my pillow, examined it, then casually threw it aside. "Arya Zhao," he said softly, "long time no see." Seeing it was him, I relaxed a little. We'd never gotten along, but I knew he wouldn't kill me. After all, we grew up together. Not lovers, not strangers, something complicated in between. "You know, trespassing into the inner palace is a capital crime," I warned. He laughed. "If I wanted it, the throne would already be mine. Do you think the inner palace could stop me?" He wasn't wrong. I had influence but no military power. He had absolute command of the army. "What do you want?" I asked. He stood. Only then did I notice he wore only a thin outer robe. As he approached, he brushed his own fingers lightly down his body. Because of our bond, the closer he came, the more the sensation crashed into me. He grabbed my chin and pressed me onto the bed. His hands skimmed my thigh. I felt nothing at first, until his sensations broke through and hit me like a wave. Heat. Then another wave. Then another. He pulled his hand away, breathing unevenly. He leaned close, lips grazing my ear. "What you did in court today? Do it again. Right here." I shook my head. He didn't get angry. He only smiled, slow, dangerous, and placed a hand on his own body. I felt everything. Tears pricked my eyes. "Stop. I'm not married yet. Don't do indecent things to me." He froze. His hand hovered above my stomach. Then he whispered, "It was I who begged to be sent to the frontier." I blinked. I had always believed Father forced him to go. Almost no one knew about our shared sensation. For the sake of my reputation, Father sealed the matter immediately. We later discovered that the farther apart we were, the weaker the bond became. At the time, I had just been brought back to the palace, my body frail. Ronan, still a young officer, got injured constantly. Every injury he suffered echoed in my body, so Father sent him away. The frontier dulled the connection. Only twice, during life-threatening injuries, did I feel anything. So it had been his choice to leave the capital. I asked, why? He stared at me, smile soft, voice low. I couldn't control myself. Then he kissed the hollow of my shoulder, once, twice, again. Until our bond tangled so tightly I could no longer tell where he ended and I began. We slept only when dawn was breaking. Half asleep, I whispered, "You have court." He stroked my head. "If we don't appear, court won't start." And he lulled me back to sleep. By mid-morning, something cool brushed my leg. I opened my eyes to see Ronan holding my leg, applying medicine. "Is this from when I hit the stool yesterday?" he asked. I looked at the bruise and shook my head. "No, you probably hit something when you flew into the sky last night." He froze, ears reddening. "No, you wouldn't understand." I glared and let him continue. Footsteps approached. Even from far away I heard Alex call, "Royal sister." Ronan panicked and helped me dress quickly. Luckily, the maid stopped Alex at the door. "Your Majesty, the Princess Royal is still resting." Alex called softly. "Royal sister, are you awake?" I cleared my throat. "I have washed." "What is it?" His voice was anxious. "Royal sister, the regent is missing." I looked at Ronan, who was struggling to put on his robe fast enough. I forced a smile. "If he's missing, go find him. Why come to me?" Alex added nervously. "Several ministers are here. They insist on seeing you." Of course they did. Ronan whispered helplessly. "I really did forget about all that last night." I sighed. "I'm not seeing anyone today." Alex answered, "Okay," and immediately collapsed onto the floor as someone shoved the door open. Ministers stormed in. I subtly kicked Ronan's dagger toward him and shot him a warning look. If anyone discovered how close we were, two things would happen. 1, my reputation would be destroyed. 2, they'd assume we planned to seize the throne. I wanted no part of the throne. And Ronan had been dragged back to the capital unwillingly. He didn't want it either. Ronan understood instantly. He grabbed the dagger and held it to my neck. "Royal sister," Alex cried. "Lord Ronan, please, don't hurt her. I'll give you anything." Then Alex's eyes widened. "Wait, is that royal sister's undergarment hanging from Lord Ronan's belt?" I froze. How was I supposed to explain that? The moment Alex spoke, every minister's gaze dropped to Ronan's waist. I glanced there too. His robe was still half unbuttoned. My embroidered doo-doo hung from his belt, swaying gently every time he moved. The air in the room went from tense to indescribable. Ronan tore it off and shoved it into his robe. From his throat came two painfully stiff words. "It's because he started. stopped, started again, no explanation ever formed. I folded my hands behind my back and pinched his thigh. The pain hit me first. I yelped. Every minister turned to look at me again. They probably thought Ronan had pressed the blade too hard and cut my neck. I snorted. "You're all just standing there watching?" I said coldly. "The regent spent last night in the pleasure quarters. He must have enjoyed himself so much that he came here this morning, grabbed me, and decided to kill me so he could take the throne." I jerked my chin toward his belt. "You all saw it, didn't you? He had some courtesan's undergarment hanging there just now." While I was trying to patch things up, Ronan twisted his fingers into the flesh of my backside. "Hard." In a voice only I could hear, he murmured, "So my reputation means nothing to you? You're worried about your reputation now?" I thought, if anyone learned what we were really doing, the court we'd just barely stabilized would crumble all over again. Alex spoke up. "That can't be right." I stared at him, silently screaming for him to shut up. He missed every cue. "That undergarment was made of Yunling brocade," he said seriously. "All of this year's Yunling tribute went into royal sister's wardrobe. No one outside the palace could possibly wear it." I closed my eyes in defeat. He couldn't memorize a single classic, but he could track every bolt of cloth in the palace. I whispered to Ronan, "Do it." There was no way out without blood. He shook his head. I knew he couldn't bring himself to act, so I grabbed his arm and threw myself against the blade. A thin line of blood opened across my neck. The room froze. Then all hell broke loose. Several ministers forgot their manners entirely and began shouting, shoving, and rushing toward us. Alex screamed for the imperial physicians. Ronan dropped the dagger in shock and reached for my wound. I kicked him. "Go, now!" He let out a long breath, took one last look at me, and finally slipped away. Chapter 2. After that, rumors spread even faster. In court, we were bitter rivals locked in a power struggle. Outside the court, he was my scandalous new lover. Ronan seemed to lean into the role. He spent almost every night in my chambers. We clashed again over another reform. I wanted to rewrite the legal code to change the laws forbidding women from doing business or holding office. He rejected it outright. We argued so fiercely in court that we parted without even a token smile. That night, he came as usual. I stood by the window and refused to look at him. He took my hand and tried to coax me. "It's not that I disagree," he said, "but we can't rush this. Right now, women can't even run a business," he continued. "They can't show their faces in public. If we flip the law overnight and allow women to trade and take office, the backlash will be huge." I finished the thought for him. "They'll accuse me of rewriting the law just to legitimize my own rule as Princess Royal." I had already thought through every one of his worries. But Alex was growing up. Ronan's authority was rising. The court could not have three people sharing power forever. If I waited, my voice would only grow weaker. I had to do what needed to be done while I could still move the empire. "I don't care what they say about me," I told him. "I'm not afraid of their gossip." He nodded and reached up, removing the hairpins from my hair one by one. "Then trust me," he said. Those 3 words eased something tight in my chest. When he finished letting my hair down, he stroked my cheek and leaned in to kiss me. I clapped a hand over his mouth and pushed him away. "Don't think a few pretty promises erase everything you said to me in court." He clicked his tongue. "So my good intentions turned into trouble, is that it?" I refused to respond. I sat at my desk and began reviewing memorials. He sat beside me, propping his chin on one hand, just watching. At first, I could still focus. Line after line of characters passed before my eyes. Then my thoughts began to scatter. His gaze went unfocused and hazy, fixed entirely on me. It felt like 1,000 ants were crawling under my skin. My chest was tight. My mouth was dry. I thought at first it was because his staring made me nervous. Then, all at once, I realized these feelings weren't mine. They were his. I kicked him away from the chair. Only then did he blink, as if waking from a trance, and the suffocating pressure inside me vanished. I took a sip of water. "If you're going to sit here quietly, then sit quietly," I said. "What on earth are you thinking about?" He sat on the floor where I'd kicked him, one hand pressed to his chest, smiling up at me. I couldn't help it. I still had a stack of memorials left. So I picked up a strip of cloth and tied it over his eyes. He complained a little, but let me blindfold him. When, he asked, are you going to give me a proper title? I thought for a beat, then answered lightly, if you hadn't gone to the frontier back then, Father might have married us already. The smile on his lips slowly faded. As children, we fought constantly, but it wasn't that I hated him. If anything, I'd liked him, just a little. When I fell seriously ill, Father kept me in the palace to recover. Soon after our bond was discovered, Ronan left the capital for the frontier. I had always believed Father was the one who sent him away. But Ronan told me he had chosen to go. 7 years passed. Whatever small affection I'd felt back then had long since worn away. In its place was a dull disappointment. He'd rather run to a desolate border fortress than stay and share the burden of pain with me. He lowered his head and rested his hand lightly on my wrist. Then tomorrow, he said, I'll ask Alex to issue a decree and marry us. But before I could finish, he tackled me onto the bed. The blindfold didn't hinder him at all. If anything, it made him bolder. He bent to my ear and whispered, I think I just discovered something very dangerous. I slept badly that night. After he'd gotten what he wanted, I kicked him out and made him go back to his own manor. Then the dream began. In it, Ronan dragged me out of a brothel when I was still a nameless girl on the streets. He stood outside my door, speaking in a low voice to someone. There is only one way to save the princess, the stranger said. But it's dangerous. One mistake and there will be no turning back. Ronan's voice was sharp and desperate. What way? No matter how dangerous, I'll do it. Transfer, the man replied. Transfer her pain and injuries onto someone else. Then she might live. And if it fails? Ronan asked. If it fails, both the princess and the one who takes her pain may. It doesn't matter, Ronan interrupted. As long as there's even a sliver of hope, I'll try. I jolted awake. Sweat soaked my clothes and the bedding. The sky outside was gray with dawn. I sat on the bed, breathing hard. What a dream, I thought bitterly. Clearly I was just inventing excuses for him, a way to forgive him for leaving without a word. I called the maids to help me wash and dress. But the moment I moved, my whole body felt like it had been taken apart and put back together wrong. I rolled up my sleeve. Bruises covered my arm. My stomach throbbed dully. When I lifted my robe, I saw an angry red mark slashed across my skin. I dressed in haste and ran toward the throne hall. In this condition, there was only one explanation. Something had happened to Ronan. Unfortunately, I'd slept like the dead. Or maybe I had woken in the night, only to pass out again from the pain. Court was already in session when I arrived. I didn't bother hiding behind the bamboo curtain. I stormed straight into the hall. Ronan's seat in the front row was empty. The ministers were whispering. When they saw me, some dropped to their knees to greet me. Others pointed at me and scolded me for disrupting court. My voice shook as I asked, Where is Ronan Song? Why isn't he here? One minister answered, We visited the regent's manor at dawn. He never returned last night. No one knows where he went. A mocking voice drifted from somewhere in the crowd. Who knows, perhaps he's still in the Princess Royal's chambers. She already threw herself into his arms anyway. I ignored it. I only wanted to find him. As soon as I looked up at the throne, a sharp pain stabbed through my belly. It felt like a knife twisting. I forced myself to walk to Ronan's usual seat and sit down. Your Majesty, I said to Alex, send soldiers. Find the regent. Alex hesitated, then turned to look at the Prime Minister. Prime Minister Wei shook his head. I waited for Alex to give the order. He didn't. When I saw the silent exchange between him and Prime Minister Wei, I finally understood. They weren't just delaying. They were planning to get rid of us. By then, my arm had started to burn. I lifted my sleeve. A thick red welt crossed my skin. If my arm looked like this, then Ronan's wound must already be bleeding badly. I pushed myself to my feet and let out a humorless laugh. So that's it, I said quietly. You two have been watching us tear each other apart this whole time, and enjoying the show. I exhaled slowly. If you won't give the order, I said, I will. I walked straight up to the throne and wrote out an imperial decree myself. Alex stood frozen in front of it, too afraid to refuse outright. Prime Minister Wei stepped forward. Arya Zhao, he said, don't you think you're overstepping? Overstepping? I sneered. It wouldn't be the first time I've overstepped. I handed the decree to one of the commanders loyal to Ronan. Here, I said, take it. The decree is genuine. If anyone wants to investigate later, they can blame me for writing it in His Majesty's name. It has nothing to do with you." He clutched the decree and turned to go, but Alex's childish voice cracked through the silence. "I want to see who dares leave." The commander froze. I leaned against the desk, looking down at Alex. I had always thought of him as my little brother. I held power only because he was too young to wield it. I'd fully intended to hand everything back once he grew. But now that he understood what power meant, he turned that power against me. One of the oldest ministers in my camp stepped forward and knelt. "Your Highness," he said, "His Majesty is still a child. The regent's fate is unknown. Please ascend the throne." The moment he spoke, all those loyal to me dropped to their knees and echoed him. Alex looked at me, hands shaking. "Royal sister," he whispered. I slapped him. "You still dare call me sister?" Prime Minister Wei waved his hand. Hidden soldiers surged out and surrounded us. He folded his arms and stopped in front of me. "So now you want to save Ronan Song?" he said. "Isn't this the perfect moment for you to rebel?" I looked at Alex. He immediately scrambled behind the Prime Minister, hiding like a frightened child. My face felt bloodless, but I held my ground. "I never wanted to be emperor," I said. Prime Minister Wei laughed. "You didn't want to be emperor? You meddled in every matter of state, seized power, and you call that not wanting it?" I shook my head. "I wanted Alex to grow up in a peaceful empire," I said. "I wanted him to inherit mountains and rivers still standing, people still able to live. I didn't want his first sight of power to be a landscape of ruin. And I wanted a different future for the women in this world. Back when unrest threatened the court, Father sent me away so I wouldn't be caught in the storm. But they still found us. In the chaos, I escaped and wandered the streets for a year. I tried everything I could think of to stay alive. Back then, my health hadn't fallen this low yet. I went to an inn and asked to work as a server. They didn't hire women. I tried to sign on as a laborer. If I had the strength, I thought, I wouldn't starve. They turned me away because I was a woman. With nowhere else to go, I was tricked and sold to a brothel. The madam kept me because I was pretty, even though I was too young to receive clients. I served the other girls instead. I washed their bedding. I scrubbed their bloodied cloths every month. I watched them come back from their patrons, covered in bruises, too terrified and too powerless to resist. Because for women like us, that was the only way to survive. So I swore an oath, if I ever returned to the palace, I would change that. When my 5-year-old brother ascended the throne, I finally got the chance. That was why I wanted power. Alex listened to me in silence, then whispered, "Royal sister, is that really what you think?" Prime Minister Wei went quiet for a beat. Then he threw his head back and laughed. "No wonder you were born in the inner palace and later drifted through a brothel," he said. "You know exactly how to tug at people's hearts. A few pretty words and His Majesty already believes you." I had no time to waste arguing with him. Every moment we stood here talking was another moment Ronan bled. "Think whatever you like," I said flatly. "If you don't trust your own sister and instead trust a minister who shares no blood with you at all, do you really think he'll help you keep your throne?" I took out the jade pendant Ronan had given me, our private token. "There have been rumors in court," I went on. "They say I'm too close to Ronan Song in private. I didn't bother explaining before, but I won't hide it now." I met Alex's eyes. "Yes, we promised ourselves to each other, in secret. And right now he's gravely injured." My chest seized. A violent cough ripped through me. I spat blood across the floor. "His life is hanging by a thread," I forced out, breathless. "We have to find him, now." The hall fell into a strange hush. Our two factions stared each other down, weighing loyalties, futures, and survival. Finally, someone broke the silence. "What are we even waiting for?" one of the ministers muttered. "If their hearts are already together, what are we fighting over?" "Exactly," another said. "Does it matter which one of them sits on the throne?" That was all it took. Everyone started moving at once, wielding whatever authority they still had. I turned and rose with Ronan's men. We weren't fighting for the throne, but we slammed straight into Alex's side anyway. Prime Minister Wei's voice cracked like a whip. "Seize Arya Zoe first." The words had barely fallen when a sword drove into my back. The pain came second. First came the shock. I turned my head slowly. My little brother, barely up to my waist, was clutching the hilt. His hands were shaking so hard the blade rattled. My blood splashed across his face. He went white, then dropped the sword as if it had burned him. The moment the steel slid in, the wound itself barely registered. What tore was my heart. He was my brother. My real brother. Same father, same mother. In this palace, there was no one in the world closer to me than him. And yet, for the sake of the throne, he'd driven a sword into me with his own hands. I pulled the blade free and turned it on him, pressing it to his throat. "Why?" I asked, my voice raw. "Alex Zhou, why?" He burst into tears. "I'm sorry, royal sister," he sobbed. "I am the emperor." He had never called himself the emperor in front of me before. I'd always thought it was because we were family, above titles. It had only been another way to make me let down my guard. I sniffed, tasting blood. Not anymore. I pressed the blade harder against his neck. I had never intended to use him as leverage. But now I was out of choices. I faced Prime Minister Wei. "This was your plan, wasn't it?" I said coldly. "Where did you take Ronan?" He ignored the question. He flicked his fingers at the guards beside him. "Kill her." The two guards lunged and were cut down by my people before they reached me. I dragged the sword a fraction closer to Alex's skin. "Talk," I said, "or I kill him." Prime Minister Wei just laughed. "You think I care whether he lives or dies?" he said. "If he dies, I'll accuse you of killing your own emperor. It helps me more." I laughed too. I patted Alex's cheek lightly. "You see that, little brother?" I said softly. "That's the man you chose." Then I hauled him toward the palace gates. As long as I held him, the soldiers didn't dare rush me. He was still their emperor. They kept their distance, afraid to be the one who got him killed. I left most of my people behind to hold off the prime minister's forces, and took only a small group with me to search for Ronan. I could no longer pry answers out of Prime Minister Wei. All I had left was the bond between Ronan and me. Whichever direction made the pain spike, that was the way to go. I followed the pain. We searched until the sky dimmed and the air turned cold. At last, in a tangle of wild undergrowth, we found him. His body was a map of wounds. He was barely upright, resting against the earth. A few corpses lay scattered behind him. He had already fought his way out once. The moment he saw me, he pushed himself to his feet and staggered toward me, each step tugging the shared pain higher. He grabbed my shoulders, eyes wild, checking me over. "I felt you get hurt," he said hoarsely. "Are you all right?" I shook my head and collapsed into his arms, sobbing. He patted my back, then forced himself straighter as if bracing against the wind. "So," he said quietly, "we've rebelled, haven't we?" His tone was gentle, but it left no room for denial. I nodded. Ronan looked down at Alex, still limp at our feet, and knocked him fully unconscious with a single strike of his hand. The struggle for the throne lasted a full day and night. In the end, Ronan himself cut down Prime Minister Wei. I spent most of it drifting in and out of awareness, fainting from pain, and clawing my way back each time. Alex was still so young. He was also my brother. I couldn't bring myself to throw him into a dungeon. So I had him confined within the palace instead, caged in gold, with nothing but himself for company. With the throne empty and my body still frail, Ronan continued running the empire. One day, an imperial decree arrived in my chambers. It was our marriage edict. He still styled himself a young general. I was still named as the Princess Royal. While I recovered, he quietly wiped out the prime minister's remaining faction. As for the people loyal to him and those loyal to me, they still bickered and snapped at each other in the halls. But in the end, we were all on the same side. Our wedding date was set 3 months out. By then, my strength had mostly returned. On that day, the court was awash with celebration. Brothers in arms from the frontier sent gifts one after another, entrusting them to a wandering physician. His name was Edward Lee. I'd heard his medical skills were unmatched. Out on the border, he had been the one keeping the soldiers alive. When he saw me, his eyes lit up. He studied my face closely, then gently lifted my eyelids to look into my eyes. "The princess has recovered beautifully," he said. I shot Ronan a puzzled look. Ronan only shrugged. "Doctors," he said. "They're all like this." But the way Edward looked at me was not the gaze of a stranger. It was the gaze of someone seeing a patient from long ago. The next day, while Ronan went to court, I went to find Edward. He was in his room grinding medicine. When he saw me, his face brightened. "Your Highness," he said, "please sit, let me take your pulse." I extended my hand. My maid laid a handkerchief over my wrist and he set his fingers lightly on top. Afterward, he wrote a prescription, tonics to strengthen my body. I finally spoke the question that had been in my chest. "Have we met before?" I asked. "I feel like I've heard your voice in a dream." The night Ronan was taken, I'd had that long, tangled dream. This was the voice speaking with him in the corridor. Edward went quiet for a moment. Then he handed the prescription to my maid. "Your Highness doesn't remember," he said gently. "When you were gravely ill back then, I was the one who treated you. I truly didn't remember. I had been unconscious almost the whole time. Back then, after I was sold to the brothel, they watched me constantly. If I so much as looked at the door, I was beaten. After nearly a year, the madam grew tired of using me only as a servant. She wanted me to start taking clients. That night, I smashed a vase over a man's head and killed him. They beat me until I could barely breathe. Then they forced medicine down my throat, poisons that ruined the body. They wanted me too weak to fight, but strong enough to keep working. The dose was too heavy. I nearly died. I don't remember how I got back to the palace. Edward told me Ronan had searched for me for a full year. He finally found me in that brothel. By then, I was unrecognizable, already half a step into the grave. He killed everyone in the building, slaughtered them all, and carried me back to the palace himself. The imperial physicians tried everything. Nothing worked. Chapter 3. In the end, Ronan went to Edward. They resorted to a technique called transfer. They would move all of my pain and injuries onto someone else. It was risky. Almost no one had ever dared to try it. If anything went wrong, both people could die. Ronan did it anyway. At that point, Edward said, your condition was already beyond saving. It almost didn't matter what we did. I thought back to my dream, their conversation in the corridor. Maybe it hadn't been a dream at all. Maybe I'd heard every word, half-conscious, and then forgotten. Later, when my whole body hurt again that night, those buried memories must have floated back up. The transfer didn't work the way they had hoped. They managed to move all of my pain into Ronan's body, but our senses became linked. The closer he was to me, the sharper the pain I felt. If nothing else changed, I would have died anyway. Then they discovered something. Distance dulled it. The farther he went, the less I hurt. He hadn't been covered in injuries because of brutal training. All the pain that should have been mine had been loaded onto him, and then bled back into me through our bond. In the end, he grew so sick he couldn't get out of bed. To protect me, he requested a post on the frontier. Officially, he was sent to guard the border. In truth, he was putting the entire empire between us to free me from the bond's grip. Out there, he danced with death again and again. Somehow, he survived. I, on the other hand, recovered enough to walk and breathe, but my weakness never truly left my bones. Edward told me all of this with a small, gentle smile. I listened with tears streaming down my face. No one had ever told me any of it. He tipped the powdered medicine from the mortar into a bowl. Originally, he said, he had no intention of coming back. You hated him so much when you were young, but when he heard how the ministers were cornering you in court, he flew back without a second thought. I wiped my tears and forced a laugh, only to come back and oppose me in person? By then, Ronan was already standing behind me. He jabbed a finger at Edward. I knew you couldn't keep your mouth shut. Edward wasn't offended. He just smiled. I just don't want you to, he said softly, to repeat what happened to Ethan and me. When he spoke Ethan's name, the light vanished from his eyes, leaving only grief. On the third day after our wedding, I returned to the palace. It was also my first time attending court since the coup. I sat behind the bamboo curtain as before. Ronan sat once again in his old place in the front row. The throne stood empty. Ronan rose, walked to the center of the hall, and knelt. Your Majesty, Princess Royal Arya, he said, the realm cannot go a single day without a sovereign. You have restored order from chaos, inspired loyalty, and strengthened the state. You are this empire's good fortune. I beg you to ascend the throne. The ministers echoed him, voices overlapping. They were right. There was no one else suited for it. And if I were emperor, the reforms I wanted would be far easier to pass. So I accepted. After the coronation, I went to see Alex. He sat in a daze, staring at nothing. The moment he saw me, he stumbled forward and dropped to his knees. Royal sister, he cried, You're my real sister. Please forgive me, please. I listened to the Prime Minister's lies, he sobbed. I trusted him instead of you. That's why I did those things. I helped him up. Have you forgotten Father's teachings? I asked quietly. He told us that no matter what happens, we must remain dignified and calm. We must not lose our composure. He forced himself to stand, trying to straighten his back. And Mother? I asked. Do you remember what she told us? Tears rolled down his cheeks. He wiped them with his sleeve. She told us to support each other, he whispered. I wiped his face clean with my own hand. Yes, I said softly. She said that in this palace, we are each other's only real family. I believed her. I wanted to guard the throne for you. But you were the one who forgot. He stared at me, speechless. I won't punish you, I said at last. As Emperor, I pardon you for the sake of our blood. You will live out your days here in the palace. However you end up, will be your own fate. The moment he heard me use the word Emperor, for myself, for me, something in him snapped. He pointed at me, eyes bloodshot. Arya Zhou, see? He shouted. You always wanted the throne. You said you didn't care, but you wanted it more than anyone. I had barely fallen and you put the crown on your own head, he yelled. You said you didn't want it, then why didn't you give it back to me? I want it. I want it. Maybe shouting made him feel better. I left his residence. Halfway down the corridor, a familiar, strange sensation washed over me. Ronan. When he wanted to find me, he always started touching himself, over and over, until the feeling reached me. I followed the pull back to our rooms. He was sitting there, a strip of cloth in his hands. This time, he said, it's your turn to wear the blindfold. I laughed. I thought of the old stories about foolish emperors, playing blind hide-and-seek games with their concubines. Then, doesn't that make me a muddle-headed ruler too, I asked. Once in a while, he said. What harm is there in that? I raised a brow. All right, I said, I'll listen to you.